Hey guys, welcome to Launch and Scale. This is the first official interview of the Launch and Scale podcast, which I'm pretty stoked. If you've been a listener for a while, you will know that this show has evolved from Crowdfunding Uncut, where that was primarily interview focused. And what I'm looking to do with this show is have a range of teaching you stuff, answering your questions, but also bringing on valuable guests from different niches that have either great results or they're doing great things. And I have Marcus Rader from HostAway, which I'll get into what HostAway is in a second. But Marcus and I have known each other for about 4 years now, I think. Mm-hmm. And we met when mutual friends brought us to a baseball game. And ever since then, we've just been friends hanging out in the startup space. And what's been really amazing about Marcus is I've seen him move to Toronto from Finland and start HostAway from nothing to over a 2-year period, maybe 2.5, bring HostAway from nothing to one of the fastest growing tech travel enterprise solution softwares on the internet and in the world, which is just fascinating to see his journey. And I thought, what better way to kick off our first interview of the show than get into the mind of someone who has taken something from nothing to 38 employees in 5 different spots over the last 2 years. So Marcus, I'm really stoked to have an officially recorded conversation with you instead of just over beer. So welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, which is so good. So let's give some context. What is HostAway?
So HostAway is a software as a service platform for vacation rental property managers. So software as a service is a concept where you buy a piece of software as a subscription model. Typical examples include Salesforce, HubSpot, Zendesk, even Stripe. And what our software does, it allows vacation rental property managers to grow faster. So through our one-in-all solution that's completely cloud-based, we connect to their partners, Airbnb, Booking.com, HomeAway, VRBO, TripAdvisor, Expedia. And within our platform, they manage all their stakeholders. So they manage their guests, they manage their cleaners, they manage their real estate investors, they manage their staff, they make sure their response times and ratings are good. And they, of course, do financial reporting as well. So pretty much everything needed to run a vacation rental business can be done through our platform.
And I know that, so I used to host on Airbnb, but it was my living room, so I wouldn't be a prime customer for you. But just to do context, if I were someone that had multiple properties and multiple listings on Airbnb, I want to maximize my listings by posting on Expedia, a ton, like Booking.com, a ton of other platforms. But imagine trying to manage 5 or 6 different booking platforms for 5+ listings. It gets to be a freaking nightmare. It's like managing multiple calendars. So your solution to be able to manage that all on one platform is phenomenal. So I know when you first started with this, you weren't so heavy on the enterprise, but you were trying to do more like smaller property managers, and that evolved. Who would you say is your ideal customer now that uses HostAway?
So right now, we only target what we consider professional property managers. But like a lot of real estate business, the term professional is a bit vague. For example, there's a lot of real estate brokers who actually have another job on the side, or maybe they're real estate brokers on weekends only. So the way I define it is those who consider their time valuable. So let's say they spend an hour or 10 hours. They have an actual price on that, because that's what businesses have. When you take in employees and you ask them to spend 10 hours on something, that's actual money away from your bank account. And if our software lowers that 10 hours into just 30 minutes, that's 9.5 hours saved time. And that's why when you were renting out your spare room, probably the 15 minutes a week you spent on it, you didn't consider yourself losing a single dollar on that 15 minutes. But if you had to pay someone, or even a team of 10 people, their salaries for a full-time job, that would be a substantial amount of money. And if you can save them time and focus on growing your business instead, that's where the value of a software like ours really come in.
Mm-hmm. And taking this back, how did you get the idea for HostAway to begin with?
It was, I'm not really a strong believer in business ideas. First of all, there's not many success stories of someone who had a great idea and then decided to implement it and it became a massive business. Usually those ideas go through a lot of iterations. And on the other hand, some of the most brilliant ideas I've ever heard when it comes to business, they never become a success at all, or they don't even try. They're just an idea. And fortunately, I knew that when I was starting out. I knew that ideas are worthless. And I had a couple of different ideas, but what I really focused on before fully committing to this, what I considered a project back then, was doing extensive research, checking overall business trends, macro trends, and then doing very in-depth interviews with actually property management companies in the industry, asking them everything from what do they first do when they wake up to what are their biggest challenges. And it wasn't very solutions oriented. It was more focused on what area do we want to be in. And then we started looking at the industry as a whole. What is Airbnb doing? What do we expect to happen? Can we find any proof on this? Can we find any scientific papers proving that our theory is right? And when we've had enough evidence and we had enough research done, we decided to do an MVP. And eventually that led us on to a couple of iterations and funding rounds and to get where we are today.
So when you focused on interviewing property management companies, even taking it a step back, did it start with you deciding you wanted to start your own company and then looking for trends and then narrowing down on the property management company type? Or did you just know that you wanted to go after property managers?
I gave it a lot of thought. I think it was more about me wanting to start a company than actually finding an opportunity. So I knew there was a million opportunities out there. I just wanted to choose the right one. So it wasn't so that an opportunity presented itself and then I evaluated whether I take it or not. No, I was actively looking for opportunities, and the market that I found was big enough, growing fast enough, going through a lot of changes and consolidation. And that's why I decided to start a company in exactly this industry, in this spot.
So how did you know that this was the right direction for you?
It came actually from personal interest. A lot of the trends that we're seeing in the world are very similar to my own experience. For example, one of the trends is remote work. People like to work in different locations. And if I'm not wrong, Kirste, you have also, yes, you don't spend all your days at the same office. You tend to work from different locations around the world. I have moved around, lived in many countries, and I know that you need flexible living solutions. If you go somewhere for a couple of months, you can't rent a place for a full year. Mm-hmm. Another major trend is travel. There's a massive middle class growing, even though people always say the middle class is dying out. Actually, globally, it's growing at a massive pace. There's a huge amount of people, especially in populous countries like China and India, that are traveling, and that is a trend that's not going anywhere anytime soon. And back when we started a couple of years ago, it was also not going anywhere. And it turns out that all the predictions are correct. People are traveling more and more. So those were the trends that we found evidence of and that we believed in. But it came out of personal interest. I like travel. I like living in different places.
That is, honestly, I think that's so important, because if you are going to devote so much of your time to build something, it has to be something you have personal interest in, or else you may not be driven as hard to do the thing.
That's very true on one hand, and some of the most successful founders that I met, they always have a personal interest. If you can align that with somehow making the world a better place, that's usually really really a nice touch as well. Unfortunately, I haven't found that alignment. I don't know how making business operations more efficient will, for example, reduce child poverty. But having somewhat of an interest, whether it's interest in technology or finances, that definitely helps. So if you don't care about money, then just don't start an accounting software company.
For sure. And there's something I want to clarify. I know you don't believe in business ideas, but when you narrowed it down to property management companies, something in flexible living space and solutions, did you have the idea for HostAway? Like, you knew in your mind it was this hosting platform for property managers, or did you just decide to go talk to property managers and figure out what was the one thing they really needed the most help with, and then the solution was born out of their feedback? Like, which of those were you?
Not actually, neither. We did want to do exactly what they were asking for. They had multiple problems, and we had a couple of different solutions for that. But those solutions were pretty difficult to build. And when we did more research, we found out that every single company on the earth that has tried has failed in building those solutions. And by failed, meaning that they only done a couple of iterations, and maybe in a few years they'll have a good solution in place. So we decided to simplify it as much as possible and go very heavy on marketing and sales first while building the MVP, because it's a lot of people think they need a product in order to sell it. But well, as you know, in the crowdfunding space, it can be the exact opposite. First you sell it, then you see if you can make the product. And that's what we did. And we were actually quite successful with our first iteration. We got a bunch of customers. One of the common breaking points of young software startups is when you talk to customers and they're willing to pay for a solution, and then you provide the solution and suddenly they're not willing to give you any money. For us, actually, that we did not have that problem. Our first customer suggested to us that how about they start paying us so that we can afford to improve the software, which was a nice thing because we didn't plan at that point to charge money for it. When we did start charging money for it, we quickly got up to about 100 customers and found out that the target audience that we have, they're way too demanding, and they're not tech savvy enough to, for example, read documentation for a fairly complex solution. And at the price that they're paying, that we were charging, we just didn't see any way this business could scale. But what we did find out is that there's a lot of companies out there with much higher demands, but they're also willing to pay for it. And that comes back to what I said earlier. If you value 1 hour of your time as $0, probably any software is going to be expensive. But if you have to pay a $20 salary to someone else, suddenly 1 hour is worth exactly $20. Mm-hmm. And that's when we started targeting those customers.
Okay. I want to clarify something. Did you build an MVP and then focus on sales?
Well, I think...
sell and then MVP.
I think a lot of companies say... Well, Facebook is a good example. If you launch a product and it doesn't work, just launch it again. And I think Facebook did 7 launches, and that's a fairly common story. But it's not actually the truth. The truth is that it's somewhere in between. There's not an exact launch. You constantly do sales, marketing, product development, market research. And at the pace that you're going, where you basically reinvent the company every single day, you can't really define lines. Sometimes you find that you're pitching an idea that's already 2 days old, and sometimes you find that you sold a solution that's only going to be available tomorrow. And but by doing these quick iterations, you can't really draw any lines. But if you do enough of them, eventually you can find a recipe that scales, which right. is all that matters when you're dealing with software.
Because something that it's not very clear to me is that you mentioned before that most actually every software solution in your space that has tried to do what you guys are doing has failed. So you focused on sales and marketing, but then you go on to say that you actually had to have a customer offer to pay you, and then you got 100 people. So like where's the line with that?
That's what I was trying to say. The line is very, very thin. And I wouldn't say that our competitors have failed. It was more that we found one niche within a niche market that was completely uncatered to, and that's the first one we attacked, and then found out exactly the reason why it's uncatered to. A bit like you find $100 bill lying on the street and you wonder why nobody picked it up. Then you pick it up and find out it's fake.
Yeah. And I find too, I think what you're getting at is you focused on developing a very, very, very basic and simple MVP that did the job, instead of focusing on building this amazing, beautiful product right away. You did bare minimum to do the job, and then focused on sales, and then use sales to gradually improve it, as opposed to the bloat of having like product devs design something amazing and not focus on sales right away.
That's very, very true. And it's sometimes hard to, I mean, if you want to build a very simple product, then you can take it quickly to market, you can quickly sell it. But that also means that if it's like a fidget spinner, that's very simple to build. And when it first came out, it was a big success, but suddenly you had 1,000 other companies producing them and the price plummeted, and now they're worthless. Mm-hmm. If you want to build something very complex, there's a certain threshold at, you need to invest a certain amount of time and money in order to make that complex solution work. Mm-hmm. But what often happens is once you're ready with that complex solution, nobody wants it, or they don't want it for the purpose you thought, or they don't want to pay what you thought.
Or the other thing happens, which is exactly what happened to you, is you found out very quickly that you were actually serving the wrong kind of, not the wrong kind of person, but the person at a price point that wouldn't allow you to scale. So the other point that I want you guys to take away from this listening is that you don't want to focus on creating this beautiful, amazing, full solution product right off the bat. You need to focus on getting the job done and bringing an MVP to market, because you're going to take real customer feedback, paying customer feedback, customers that are using your product or your software, that are going to help you create the iterations for that customer ahead of time, so that you can really build onto the product as you grow as a company.
Yeah, and something that's a great summary right there, and something that I find a lot when I talk to people who actually want to become entrepreneurs, that have a good idea and have all the basic skills needed. They tend to do exactly the same thing that I did as well, which is set up these mental barriers. For example, if I just had $1 million, or if I just had a development team, or if I just had a co-founder, and they focus so much on that they bind themselves down. They can never get to the next stage, and that's actually what took us forward. Instead of looking at what do we want to become in the end and how do we get there, we were looking at, okay, what is the next step? Can we get 1 million? Can we hire 10 developers? No. Okay, well, what can we do? Realistically, what can we do? And where would that take us? And that's exactly what we did. We found out that, okay, there's 100 things that we should do, but if we just do 3 of them, we'll not get to the next stage. And if all 3 of those work out fine, then we can get enough resources to do 10 more. And if those work out fine, then we can do the 90 others. And that's a much nicer approach, because that way you actually can move forward with something more tangible and realistic.
No, that makes so much sense. How did you find, like, if you have 100 things, how do you decide what those 3 are?
In reality, it's in hindsight, it's always going to be those 3, but in practice, you have to try 20 of them. And if you're successful, at the end, you can go back and say, oh, I was so good. I looked at a list of 100 things and I managed to pick the 3 that really mattered. In reality, I haven't really seen that with anyone. You have to try a little bit, and I think luck is a big factor there. Trying to do as much as possible, as many different things as possible, and dismiss the opportunities. Try to get any proof or disproof of concept as fast as possible so that you can move on to the next thing, and constantly hope that you happen to stumble upon the right one, and that will bring you to the next stage.
Makes sense. My last topic I want to talk about is the pivot from, I think it was the $9 a month solo person you were going after to now enterprise solution. When you realized that your pricing structure didn't make sense for where you wanted to take this, how did you start to pivot toward the higher end solutions?
Very good, good question. I remember it was, we had a long, hard meeting, I think 3 or 4 days, when we really evaluated the market size and the options. We tried to figure out, can we automate certain parts of the process? What are the challenges? And eventually we decided that, I think even at that stage, we realized that we don't have enough time or money. We have one shot at making this happen. And but if we don't do it, we're probably going to fail anyway. Mm-hmm. And we made that decision. It was one of the most stressful summers, especially for the development team, which back then was 3 people, mm-hmm. To build all the features. And yeah, we did the decision in May, and we could confirm that things looked good by September, November. But when things look good, that usually means that it feels good. It doesn't show up on the bank account yet. Now, feeling good doesn't pay anyone's salary either, which is a problem when people want a salary. It doesn't matter how good it feels.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's what you have to go with. And to us, it felt good. And we just had to sell the idea that it feels so good that in a couple of months we'll see some money on the bank account, and that's exactly what happened. So we were able to scale up our product or change it in a way so that bigger companies were able to utilize it and pay more for it.
I can't imagine that being an easy conversation where you decide internally to pivot away from something that's already proven to make revenue, have to go to your VCs or your board of directors and say, this is the move we want to make. I can't imagine that was an easy conversation.
Yeah, fortunately, we didn't have to do that at that stage. We were so early on that there wasn't really pressure. But of course, for us, it was massive pressure because we knew that our current business is not going to take us to the next stage, and we have to make this change, but it's going to destroy a lot of what we built. Mm-hmm. And what nobody told us at that point is that the experience that we gained in the first couple of tries is going to make everything so much easier. So we actually thought it was going to be harder than it eventually was. But it would have been nice to have an outsider to come and say, look, you built this business already a couple of times. Now you need to rebuild it from scratch. It's going to be much easier. But it sure didn't feel like that when we made the decision.
When did you know can you go back to a moment when you realized, I think we made the right decision? Like, when did that happen?
I think for me, it was when, I don't know, I had a realization one day. I don't even remember when it was, at what stage, when I realized that that we have gone from being an idea to being a startup to struggling to survive to be a company where we are in charge. We are not going to go bankrupt because we have the flexibility to make changes necessary, whatever happens. And that was one of the happiest days in my life, because before that, I had been constantly focusing on when are we running out of money?
Yeah.
And the funny thing with a runway and with fast growing revenues is that things change every day, but you can also make future plans and then change them later on based on what happened yesterday when you have the actual information. And that way you can adjust your own runway depending on how things are going.
So you would say this pivot gave you confidence to to make massive business changes in the future where necessary.
Yes,
Without
and
hitting
yeah,
your bottom.
absolutely. But it's, I would not look forward to doing a pivot anytime soon, because it's a lot easier when you don't have employees, when you don't have customers who rely on your product. You can make a lot of changes, and more importantly, you can make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But once you have customers who rely on your product, and once you have employees who rely on either your leadership, or in some cases maybe rely on getting a paycheck, or I don't know what employees appreciate more, then you can't just go around making a bunch of mistakes all the time and testing things out, because it can upset a lot of people. So the changes have to be better planned, and they have to be executed way better as you grow.
Well, I'm going to wrap this here. If anyone listening wants to learn a bit more about what you guys are doing, what is a good spot to send them?
The best spot and the best approach here, if you want to learn how to be amazing at life, is to go to hostaway.com and look at the open jobs positions, find the one you like, and I guarantee you will find satisfaction. I
agree. It's a fantastic company to work for. And you guys are hiring for virtually every position now.
Every position, everywhere.
Great. Awesome. Okay, well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll wrap it here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a good day.